So in 2018, when I was 20 years old, I was studying in Jerusalem in an all-male religious nationalist seminary. And while I was there, I started having questions about the entire population that existed beyond these walls. And as part of my program, there were individuals who were doing this interesting program where folks actually met Palestinians and heard some of their perspectives. So I decided to go to that program. And I remember I was sitting there at 9 a.m. in Jerusalem, and a Palestinian man had come to speak to us. And he was describing how he had to get up at 4:30 a.m. to make it to Jerusalem at 9 a.m. Even though he lived in Ramallah, which is only like 7 miles away. So obviously my brain goes, well, that doesn't make any sense. And then I listened how he proceeded to talk about the system of checkpoints, how he had to get on a separate bus, how he had to make the calculation of whether it made more sense for him to stay on the bus, knowing that if he's on the bus, he could be kicked off the bus at the checkpoint and go to the back of the line, or if it just made sense to just wait on the non-bus part of the checkpoint to get through to make sure that he got here in time, to speak to a bunch of Zionist Jews to try to convince them that Palestinians were human. So I said to him, I was like, I need to know more. He said, well, why don't you come with me to Ramallah? So I'll tell you, the first thought that rose in my mind, it was rising and it said, if I go, you will kill me. Because that was the way I was conditioned. Growing up, for me, Palestinians were terrorists. There was no possibility that a Palestinian was human, and certainly no possibility that Palestinian resistance had nothing to do with Jewish folks, but had to do with the fact that there were settlers kicking Palestinians off their land, upholding apartheid, ethnic cleansing, and genocide. So as that thought was rising, there was another voice in me, and I think this voice is a deep ancestral voice, and to this day, I'm amazed at myself that I was able to challenge all of my conditioning with a second voice, a deeper voice, a deeper knowing. And that voice immediately said, well, you've been told your whole life that this person was going to kill you and that this person was a terrorist and he wasn't human. And he's standing right in front of you, and he's the exact opposite of those things. And in that moment, I didn't vocalize that thought, and I called bullshit, and I said, yeah, I'll come. I'll come. I need to see it for myself. Now, as a Zionist kid growing up, this was unheard of. The thought that I could go to a Palestinian town and come back in anything less than a body bag was absurd. So, but he said, you got to come in the next couple of days. So during lunch, I took off my kippah, I put on a hat, and I went to Shar Shechem, which is Damascus Gate, the only place I wasn't allowed to go to when I was in yeshiva, for fear that Palestinians would kill me. And the second I stepped into Damascus Gate, I essentially, I don't want to say became Palestinian, that's ridiculous. I had tremendous privilege as a settler, but I got to taste, maybe instead of a drop in the ocean, I got to taste the mist surrounding one drop in the ocean of what it's like to be subject to a settler colonial regime. And I got on a Palestinian bus, and for me, I was like, well, this is interesting that it's a completely different busing system, but even more than that, it's like I all of a sudden was with the people who were supposed to kill me. And in fact, the very opposite happened, where when I was on a Palestinian bus, all of a sudden my sense of identity and belonging started to become Palestinian in terms of my sense of where my safety lies. And my sense of threat immediately became, holy shit, I'm on a Palestinian bus. I am being read as Palestinian in a genocidal settler colony. I am about to go through an hour and a half of military checkpoints in knowing that this occupying army can do whatever they want to me.
I think that is the most disheartening thing. I think or I thought, at least even 20 years ago when I started to work internationally, that there was this, in my head, some weird idea of good guys, some idea of those, whether it be certain countries or certain peoples, maybe it was this holdover from World War II and this thought that this was so that the lines were clearer and that there was going to be these human rights. And to watch and understand more and more, it's just simply, that's not what it is. That's not the world. The world is not, these are human rights. It is, these are human rights sometimes for these people, maybe sometimes for these people, never for these people.
And I remember the process of just like this image of a Palestinian father being comforted by his daughter. This man's probably 65 years old. And just me just realizing in that moment, like, the deep humiliation that this person had to undergo. And he was someone privileged who was able to leave Ramallah to Jerusalem. And I remember just going through the Columbia checkpoint, IDF soldiers coming on, harassing us. And I remember going into the Columbia checkpoint and being on the inside of the wall and seeing the beautiful graffiti and seeing that there was a graffiti of someone, a kid with a slingshot. And my Jewish brain at the time said, wow, this is amazing. The Quran and the Torah are so similar. They also have an image of King David with a slingshot. And then after that, the bus kept going and the slingshot was pointed at an IDF soldier. And that's when it started to crumble for me, where I said, wait a second, who's who here? Who's David and who's Goliath? These are the same rocks that my ancestors used to resist oppression. And now these rocks of Palestine are being used by Palestinians to resist oppression too. And we have become our worst nightmare.
Yeah.
This person just explaining to me, this beautiful Palestinian human just explaining to me, being so patient with me, speaking to a Zionist settler, speaking to me and just saying like, dude, like, most people here have never seen Jerusalem. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's literally right there. It's like you have to be a male and 65 or older, or women 55 or older, or you need to have someone sponsor you for a work permit. But the only way they can sponsor you, there has to be an Israeli. And how the is an Israeli going to sponsor you if they don't even know you exist because you're behind the wall? And I remember him saying to me, he said, Shlomo, what would you do? What would you do if your entire life, the only person you saw and the only interaction you ever had with Jews were IDF soldiers who came in and raided you and arrested you in the middle of the night, put you under administrative detention, tear gassed your homes, cut off your water and electricity? He said, what would you fucking do? And I said, if you don't think that I would resist with every single fiber in my being to liberate myself from this colonial hell, you are out of your mind. I said, do you know my ancestry? Do you know who I come from? My grandfather survived Auschwitz. You think I wouldn't fight back? That was after 6 hours. Can you imagine what 18 years, what 30 years does to the psyche of someone like that? And y'all sit here and get confused with Palestinian resistance? Are you kidding me? All that shows me is that A, you have no idea what the settler colony of Israel is, and B, it's disrespectful. You're disrespecting yourself because you're telling me that if you were in that position, you wouldn't fight back. So let's fucking get it together and start telling the truth and take this seriously. Let's fucking free Palestine for all people, everyone on the land.